Good evening, Vanakkam, Namaskaram. Let me quickly share my screen. Can someone confirm if the screen is visible?
Yes, sir, visible. Visible,
Thank
sir.
you. Thank you. Before I start, let me read out this small phrase which is very closely related to security. I really think that if we change our own approach and thinking about what we have available to us, that is what will unlock our ability to excel in security. This is a quote by Greg Yark, one of a great expert in cybersecurity. And as we go, play this video for everyone. Is the video visible?
You don't know these people, but they've spent the last 10 months getting to know everything about you, your colleagues, and your company. They've been quietly scanning and mapping your networks, collecting credentials, and identifying the critical data they want to exploit, all without being noticed. Until today. Three.
Dalawa.
Boom.
Hey, you about ready to get out of here?
No, another exciting night of event triage and analysis.
Sounds thrilling. Try not to have too much fun.
Yeah.
Hey, have a good weekend.
You too. Hey, Meg. Before you go, did you see this email from the cyber threat intel provider?
Wait, what?
Okay, let me check some SIM logs.
Is this accurate?
Who disabled the log feed from the server? All the IDSs are down too.
Yeah, you need to get Reynolds on the phone. Now!
I promise, I'm leaving now. I'm sorry, I got tied up. I know the reservations are at 8. Don't worry, I'll be there. Honey, I'm gonna have to call you back. What's wrong?
Bruce, this looks like a major compromise. The cyber threat intel provider found a sample of our data for sale on the dark web. As I was going to confirm the sample, I found that the IDSs and the logs are down.
Yeah, it gets worse. Our public-facing websites are going offline. Employee data, client data, the email servers, account numbers. It's all up for sale to the highest bidder if we don't pay now. What do you want us to do? Bruce, what do you want us to do?
Checkmate.
Go to severity level 1. Recall the team. I want forensics all over this. I'll notify leadership and meet you in the SOC. Got a long night ahead of us.
Good afternoon, Namaskaram. This is Dr. Sampath Kumar. Welcome to another lecture on small lecture on cybersecurity. Thank you, distinguished guests, associate professors, all protocols observed. So, what is cybersecurity? Cybersecurity is application of technologies. எல்லா டெக்னாலஜிஸ் என்னென்ன விதமாக அப்ளை பண்ண முடியும், என்ன ப்ராசஸ், என்ன கண்ட்ரோல், என்னெல்லாம் பண்ணி அதை ஐடி இன்ஃபர்மேஷன் சிஸ்டம்ஸு, நெட்ஒர்க்ஸை, ப்ரோக்ராம்ஸ் இதெல்லாம் வந்து ப்ரொடெக்ட் பண்ண முடியும் அப்படிங்கிறத பற்றி தான் அதுக்கு இட்ஸ் அ கலெக்ஷன். அந்த கலெக்ஷனுக்கு தான் வந்து சைபர் செக்யூரிட்டி அப்படிங்கிறோம். சைபர் செக்யூரிட்டி அட்டாக் ஆர் த்ரெட்ஸ் அப்படிங்கிறது ஏஜென்ட்ஸ், அதை யார் அட்டாக் பண்ணுறாங்களோ அவங்களுக்கு அது வந்து அட்டாக் அப்படின்னு சொல்லலாம். அந்த மாதிரி நிறைய விஷயங்கள் இருக்குது இதில். The aim of cybersecurity அப்படின்னு பார்த்தோம்னா is to protect an enterprise organization or an individual's private data. Can be anything, right from your small personal photos or family photos, music, to a large enterprise organizations, database and things like that. இதில் வந்து நிறைய டொமைன்ஸ் இருக்குது. அந்த டொமைன்ஸ்லாம் பார்த்தோன்னா கலெக்ஷன் அப்படின்னு ஒரு இது எடுத்தோம்னா இதில் பேசிக்காக இட் இஸ் ஸ்டாண்டர்ட்ஸ், ஃப்ரேம்வொர்க்ஸ், ஃபிசிக்கல் செக்யூரிட்டி, application security, threat intelligence, governance, training, security architecture, risk assessment, security operations, enterprise risk assessment, management. It all falls under the domain of cybersecurity. So each of this has got a technical and a predominant role to play in looking into cybersecurity. General cybersecurity உடைய இது வந்து பார்த்தோம்னா there is a series of command line that goes through. So each and every organization can have its own way of chain of commands to execute. இப்போ இந்த வீடியோவில் இப்போ பார்த்த மாதிரி one of them is the chief security officer or CSO அப்படின்னு சொல்லுவோம். இல்லை he can be an CIO or information technology under whom everything falls into place. So there are different teams, different management areas where people have different access. இப்போ chief security officer கீழன்னு பார்த்தோம்னா he can have a program management. Under that he can have an incident response team and an incident management team. Vendor management தனியாக இருக்கலாம். ஏன்னா third party vendors provide a lot of service in terms of cyber security areas. project management team இருக்கலாம், risk management team இருக்கலாம், people management team இருக்கலாம். People management team may play a very vital role in terms of managing people's psychological profile and behavior to a large extent. பெரிய ஆர்கனைசேஷனில் it is very very crucial that the psychological aspects of people are taken into account. For example, இப்போ he may be ஒரு person இருக்கான், he may be an expert in terms of he may be the chief security manager or things like that, but if his mind is away, it becomes a serious problem. ஏன்னா இப்போ ஒரு கம்பெனிலேருந்து இன்னொரு கம்பெனிக்கு அவன் தாவறான் அப்படிங்கிறச்ச he also carries information inside how security is handled in the other company or things like that. So it's also important to map psychological profile of people into take that into consideration when we really look at hiring an expert on cyber security to handle security in an organization. So under incident management அப்படின்னு எடுத்துட்டோம்னா it is very very crucial, because when there is a cyber security attack, it is the incident management team that actually responds initially. So they have different way of doing things. ஒரு investigations team இருக்கலாம், ஒரு service continuity team இருக்கலாம், root cause analysis and triage team இருக்கலாம், problem management team இருக்கலாம், CISRT ஒரு team இருக்கலாம். Each and every organization will have its own way of doing things. In small and middle organizations in Patana, there may not be too many portfolios, and they may not have a very big hierarchy, and it may be one single person who is actually handling information. He is also the data security officer, he is also the CSO and things like that. Generally in the investigations team அப்படின்னு எடுத்தோம்னா, when there is a response initially, you will have teams to manage each and every areas. So this is just a small hierarchical way of who reports to whom and what is the screen behind it. Cyber security உடைய main cause பார்த்தோம்னா, it is to protect the information from falling into wrong hands. So ஏற்கனவே this is another section. Actually, this was one of a well defined um, mind map அப்படின்னு சொல்லலாம். How cyber security and what chain of commands people follow. ஸோ இதில் வந்து பார்த்தோம்னா இது மேபி அனதர் ஏரியாஸ் லைக் சிஓஎஸ்ஓ ஒரு இஆர்எம் என்டர்பிரைஸ் ரிசோர்ஸ் மேனேஜ்மெண்ட் டீமாக இருக்கலாம், ரிஸ்க் ட்ரீட்மெண்ட் பிளான் டீம் இருக்கலாம், ரிஸ்க் ரிஜிஸ்ட்ரி டீம் இருக்கலாம். ஸோ இந்த ரிஸ்க் ரிஜிஸ்ட்ரி team வந்து they may have some specific role to play in terms of assessing risk and managing the risk areas. So each and every chain of command here actually has got a lot of impact on the chief security officer. Everything comes under him. So in the event of a failure of one person to carry out their respective job, it is going to have a negative impact. The cybersecurity team also not only have a knowledge management team. The knowledge management officer is very critical in a cybersecurity team because he understands what exactly are we looking into, and he is the knowledge management person is the person who may even say that this documentations we are looking into, we already have some of them, so maybe we should just திருப்பி போய் அதை revisit பண்ணி how it was handled based பண்ணி any type of new security things can be handled. So these are some of the ways how governance works in terms of cybersecurity. A governance team also, so even if he is a chief cybersecurity officer, he may have a governance person in the team. It is not necessary that இது எல்லாமே வந்து different people இருக்கணும் அப்படிங்கிறது கிடையாது. There may be one person who may handle multiple roles in terms of handling cybersecurity. So, in simple terms, பார்த்தோம் அப்படின்னா at the end of the day, cybersecurity officer or cybersecurity CSOC plays a very vital role in terms of handling an enterprise security architecture. These are some of the hierarchical roles, how it is defined, what is being presented. So beyond this, இது வந்து நம்ம பேசணும்னா we should be going deep into this. So cybersecurity has got different domains. Domains is what makes that is why I said that cybersecurity is a collection of things. அதில் வந்து security operations தனியாக இருக்கும், ஒரு த்ரெட் இன்டெலிஜென்ஸ் கேதரிங் டீம் தனியாக இருக்கும். இட் இஸ் ஆல் செப்பரேட் டொமைன்ஸ். ஸோ த்ரெட் இன்டெலிஜென்ஸ் டீம் டொமைன் வந்து செப்பரேட்டாக இருக்கலாம். ரிஸ்க் அசஸ்மெண்ட் டொமைன் இஸ் செப்பரேட், கவர்னன்ஸ் இஸ் செப்பரேட். யூ வில் ஹாவ் ஸ்டாண்டர்ட்ஸ் அண்ட் ஃப்ரேம் ஒர்க் domain separate. You have a career development team domain separate. You have a security architecture domain separate, and you will have physical security domain which is separate. Each of this has got very vital roles to play. இப்போ பேசிக்கா அப்போ இதுல என்ன சைபர் செக்யூரிட்டி டொமைன்ல ஒன் கேன் எக்ஸல் if one wants to become a risk assessment officer, he can actually choose his line to say that this is what I am going to be doing. இதுலயே வந்து பார்த்தோம்னா பேசிக்கா ஒரு த்ரெட் இன்டெலிஜென்ஸ் டீம் ஆர் த்ரெட் இன்டெலிஜென்ஸ் டொமைன்ல எடுத்துனோம் அப்படின்னா அந்த டொமைன்ல இருக்கிற person வந்து he may have started his career in a very small way. He would be interested in analyzing threats. For example, அது த்ரெட்ஸ் வந்து இன்டர்னலாக இருக்கலாம், எக்ஸ்டர்னலாக இருக்கலாம். அதில் வந்து திஸ் த்ரெட் இன்டெலிஜென்ஸ் team also share information on different threats. So இதில் இந்த basically the person who actually is starting his career as a threat intelligence person, அப்படின்னா he may start with the basic of even understanding what are the different types of mails I get, what are the different types of mails and where malware is embedded and sent. So his analysis not only bases only on the particular incident or particular area, but also he will be looking at different information gathering from different sources. இப்போ ஒரு கம்பெனியில் வந்து ஒரு malware hit ஆயிருக்கு அப்படின்னா, as a threat intelligence officer, he can actually have a talk with the other different company to find out, okay, இது இந்த மாதிரி I came across in the paper that your organization has been hit. Is there something that we can share it in terms of what exactly was the root cause and things like that. When we look at threat intelligence, it also gathers a lot of information. Information becomes very crucial in this. The simplest is, say, for example, a Doppler malware. Or malware is something that a hacker, he can be like different, he can be an individual hacker who just got so annoyed with the company that he just wanted to drop the Doppler there and see what impact it has. ஸோ அந்த மாதிரி இன்டெலிஜென்ஸ்லாம் கூட இப்போ டாப்லர் அதை வந்து அந்த வேர்ம் வந்து மே have a different impact on his system. His security breach may be done in a different way. So in the intelligence la share பண்ணிக்கிறதுக்கு can be is the role of a threat intelligence officer. So if we look at cybersecurity domain liye governance nu eduthu paathandona vechupome, governance la there are so many areas. A governance person can actually be a person who is an auditor, who can be an audit person, who actually looks into the areas of what are the different risks and things like that. And may even look at laws and regulations. And I said, like, a governance could, a risk may be separate, and a risk officer also will be involved in terms of managing the whole organization. Basically, எல்லாமே வந்து is இந்த governance பொறுத்தவரையிலும் is all policies, procedures, standards, guidelines, compliance enforcement. இதை பத்தி நிறைய நம்ம ஏற்கனவே 2-3 பார்த்துருக்கோம். செப்பரேட்டா எடுத்துட்டோம் அப்படின்னோம்னா ரிஸ்க் அசஸ்மெண்ட்டுக்குன்னு ஒரு தனியா ஒரு டொமைன் இருக்கு. அந்த டொமைன்ல எடுத்துட்டோம்னா அந்த ரிஸ்க் அசஸ்மெண்ட் டீம் ஆக்சுவலி கேரிஸ் அவுட் லாட் மோர் தென் வாட் த கவர்னன்ஸ் team or any other team carries out. Risk assessment officer is also responsible for understanding what types of vulnerabilities in a big organization. For example, say ஒரு simplest ஒரு tax program develop பண்ணிட்டு இருக்கோம். And the risk, it becomes the responsibility of the risk assessment officer to actually look into what type of vulnerabilities are there. Is this vulnerability, can it be exploited? If it can be exploited, what are the ways it can be done? So the risk assessment officer is also responsible for ensuring that the entire program is tested using scientific techniques. Many risk assessment officers also look into the testing aspects of both internal and external of penetration testing, and gather results and critical information from them to understand and see what can be patched, what cannot be patched, and things like that. Yeah, if இது எல்லாமே is each of these domain is a separate domain. If a person wants to actually be interested only in doing penetration testing, his concentration will be only to understand what pen tests programs can be used to carry out the assessment and things like that. So you will have a different structure under a pen tester, and all of these people report to the risk assessment officer, who all comes under the chief security officer, or the CIO, or whoever is leading the team. It is not necessary, like I said, it can be different people, it can be one person who may carry out so many activities in these areas. இதில் ரொம்ப முக்கியமான விஷயம் வந்து in a red team also is the people who actually look into handling the way these risks are looked into. In the domain liye ipo there are areas like physical security. Physical security largely involves protection of your data center physically, and things like that. For example, இப்போ ஒரு பெரிய இன்ஃபோசிஸ் கேம்பஸ்குள்ளே போகிறோம் அப்படின்னா, we actually say that you should have 1, 2, 3, 4 you should meet 1, 2, 3, 4 regulations for you to enter the company அப்படின்னு வச்சுப்போம். இப்போ போன உடனே ஃபர்ஸ்ட் ஆஸ் எ கெஸ்ட் ஐ மே enter the campus as a guest, or maybe I'm just trying to attend an interview. It becomes the responsibility of the physical security officer to understand இந்த இன்டர்வியூ வந்துடுவேன், எங்கே போகிறான், எப்படி போகிறான் அப்படிங்க. ஸோ they will generally give you a small visitor's identity card and maybe even use a biometric or something to let you through. Once your interview is directed or done, you should come back. You shouldn't be going around to say, I'm going to go to see what the data center looks like. So or what is that they carry out in these areas, until and unless he has got specific access to visit. So adalla, it is a responsibility of the physical security officer to ensure that certain areas are not compromised. அப்படி எடுத்துனோன்னா அதே மாதிரி same thing applies to frameworks and standards. Some may be interested only in this area to make sure that the governance and the business goals are aligned with the IT domains. So that responsibility actually comes under a compliance officer who also ensures that the frameworks and standards are explicitly followed. The frameworks and standards can be based on, like I said, multiple ways. It can be based on ISO, or it can be based on an NIST framework. It can be based on COVID frameworks, or it can be based on SANS framework. Similarly, it is very important. IT cybersecurity domain பொறுத்தவரையிலும், it is not a limited domain. It has got a lot of learning to be done. So if a person I'm a pen tester அப்படின்னு வச்சுப்போம், a pen tester has learned something, he is going to அதையே திருப்பி பண்ணிட்டு இருந்தோம்னா, he is not going to get anywhere close, because this industry as a whole itself is very dynamic. ஒரு நேற்று இருக்கிற threats இன்னைக்கு இருக்கிறதுக்கு வாய்ப்பு இல்லை. இந்த threats maybe can even change overnight. So it is very important for people to upgrade their career and try to understand where the cybersecurity domain, where they can improve. So adila they may even this mostly comes under career development section, but it is not necessary that it should be reported only to CIO or things like that. But it is essential that the CIO should know that these areas are the improvement areas that he has to do. Same thing applies to security architecture. Security architecture is the core of the whole cybersecurity team. So in the security architecture, you have different areas. For example, for data protection security officer data protection security officer he can be a network design security officer or a baseline configuration system, security engineering, cryptography. These are areas where one can excel in terms of security architecture. Similarly, you have security operations team, which also have which also handle vulnerabilities, the defense of the entire environment. It also incidents response is also done by security operation centers. So under that, they will have different sections. For example, recovery irkalam, detection protection team irkalam, prevention team irkalam, breach notification, containment, forensics, everything comes under security operations team. Adukku it is a security operations center SOC அப்படின்னு கூட நம்ம சொல்லுவோம். So what is cyber threat, cyber terrorism, crime, espionage அப்படின்னு பார்த்தோம்னா, cyber threat can be described as a possibility of a malicious attempt to damage or disturb a network or a server or any system for that matter. It's very critical to understand each of these things. So a threat can be some of them may be actually positive, false negatives, false positives, and things like that. Cyber terrorism அப்படின்னு எடுத்துட்டோம்னா, is anything that can actually bring down the entire it can disrupt and cause severe damage to the entire country in many ways. For example, இப்போ நான் வந்து ஒரு பவர் ஸ்டேஷனை வந்து ஐம் ஜஸ்ட் கோயிங் டு பிரிங் டவுன் அப்படின்னா it is going to cause disruption to almost entire country. That is exactly what happened way back in 2020. Late 2020 there was a big cyber attack where some of the grids actually failed. அது வந்து though it is a cyber attack, it can actually be termed as a cyber terrorism to spread fear and things like that. Cyber warfare is most of the mostly related to people, can be anything which will deal with military or security agencies like police, military or entire computer infrastructures. I have to bring it down. I can term it as a cyber warfare. So hacktivism is something that is actually very widely known. Hackers and hacktivists can just be self-motivated. They can be disgruntled employees. It's just to prove a point. அப்படிங்கிறது கூட சொல்லலாம். Socially motivated இருக்கலாம். Some of them may even have a personal vendetta to a particular person, and so maybe he just hacked into it. So hacktivism is not it cannot cause that kind of damage like different other sections actually do. But this is and the hacktivism also has got a widespread impact, and this is the most active area. If we look at cyber espionage, it is mostly use of computer networks to pry on other companies and things like that. The reason for that is to understand what the other company is doing in terms of business growth. Is there something that we can copy or we can steal information from? So in the espionage, cyber espionage is also widely used. Information warfare actually is more of manipulating information on targets without the awareness of the particular person. This can be to enhance competitive advantage over the peer அப்படின்னு கூட over the opponent கூட வச்சுக்கலாம். So in the area is also widely exhibited in many places. If it is say for example, two companies are competing in the same space for program development. One may actually succeed because of the skill sets that the company may possess, the other may not. So under these conditions, now I can actually do a information warfare to assess what information can I gather, and the information gather பண்ணி எப்படி பண்ணலாம் அப்படிங்கிற ஒரு எண்ணத்தோட I can actually attack the other company. Cracking is just a small technique that is just a breach of a particular computer or a software or even a security system with a bad intent. This is not very well known, but it can be very destructive as well. Types of cybersecurity threats அப்படின்னு பார்த்தோம்னா there are lots of threats. Malware, man in the middle attacks, spears phishing, DNS, denial of service, advanced persistent threats, ransomware, IP theft, website development, website defacement, system infiltration, instant messaging abuse and things like that. இதுல ரொம்ப most common form of attack is nowadays is ransomware. And ransomware it can be very, very destructive, and ransomware can have multiple groups. Multiple hackers in a group which can actually coordinate and attack a company. Just on the modalla video paatha mari, they will actually have made a thorough analysis before they even try to compromise a company. So generally, some of them may even wait for months and years together to just do an security attack. But இதுல வந்து ransomware is not only destructive, it is also um, economically very very expensive for people to come back to their life. இப்போ ஒன் ஆஃப் த ஒரு சிம்பிளஸ்ட் இது வந்து ransomware எடுத்தோம்னா, இப்போ there was a R evil gang which actually hacked into Kesa network. That is that was a very destructive supply chain attack. Same thing, it had impacts on many other companies, right, from Microsoft, Mimecast, and things like that, where they actually played a very vital destructive role. In recent times, and ransomware groups also have a way of saying, because ransomware, or if I say, suppose I am going to hit a company with a ransomware அப்படின்னா, generally the company will start negotiating to say, can you unlock this for us, இவ்வளோலாம் எங்களால் பைசா தர முடியாது. So minimum, if we look at ransomware attacks, the minimum demands will be anything from $1 million to over $50 million or things like that, depending on the services, depending on what impact it has on business. அதுக்கு வந்து generally there are legal firms who may hire negotiators to help them recover the systems from the ransomware attackers. Colonial pipeline attack was also one of a similar attack, where they had to actually pay a lot of money in ransom to recover their systems and get the critical infrastructure up and running again. Though FBI is saying that we have recovered most of the amount, there are still gaps in that. Malware is the most common way that is generally pushed to attack a system. It can be a spyware, it can be a ransomware. They generally embed malwares with ransomware and then try to get a system to compromise. Any of these attacks is a combination of attacks அப்படின்னு கூட சொல்லலாம். Actually, that is what actually happens. When we look at the man in the middle attack, that is an entirely different area. It also has got definitely a lot of what to say, involvement from 2 or 3 parties together. இப்போ 95% of HTTPS servers எடுத்தோம்னா, it is very vulnerable to man in the middle attack. If you look at spear phishing, it is spear phishing அப்படிங்கிற இதெல்லாம் generally இப்போ நம்ம வந்து ஒரு ஃபிஷ் பண்றோம் அப்படின்னா, it has got a motive behind it. The phishing வந்து it can be targeted, it can be just I'm just going to attack some random person அப்படிங்கிற. They will just send out a mail based on your profile. If I say xyz@gmail.com அப்படின்னு ஒருத்தருடைய பேர் இருக்கு, and he is very prominent, now I can actually capture that email and then say, okay, I'm going to see what this guy responds. I mean, you will just send a mail to him with some attachment. The attachment may carry some malware, it may carry some deployment tool, which we call as payload. And a payload, the moment you click this, the entire particular system gets compromised and things like that. Phishing also can be in terms of getting information, sensitive information like credit cards, credit card information, gathering information on your personal bank accounts and things like that. So 80%, over 80% of companies reported that they have experienced phishing attacks on a regular basis. If we look at the malware part, the cost actually, the average cost to a malware attack is roughly about $2.5 million per day. This is a report that was published by Accenture sometime back in 2021, early 2021. DNS spoof is widely known, where your DNS actually is compromised and then not compromised. It can be spoofed and then used that as a attack to compromise an entire organization. Denial of service is that you have a particular area where you won't get that service, and a denial of service வந்து ரொம்ப கொஞ்சம் ஒரு 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 வித்தியாசமான ஒரு அட்டாக்ஸ், சிஸ்டமை வந்து ஃப்ளட் பண்ணுறதுன்னு வித் மேசிவ் லோட்ஸ் ஆஃப் டிராஃபிக் ஸோ தட் யர் entire network becomes so slow. So it can also be used as a targeted attack with a DDoS attack or a DOS attack or things like that. Approximately, it is about 8.4 million DDoS attacks that were reported during 2019. And many of the companies actually don't go and report any of these attacks. That is because of reputational damage and things like that. SQL injection is again one of the major threat which is used to deface websites and things like that. SQL injection has about 65 to 70% of websites are vulnerable, and they can actually be injected with SQL to gather information. So zero-day exploits is nothing but you have it's a deficiency in programming, and a programming or a vulnerability is exploited extremely by hackers and criminals like. So on a general note, Patona, it is widely expected that these type of attacks is going to cost anywhere between $4 to $5 million. So if on a daily basis per company, some of them even lose. Some of them even had to close their companies down. One such was in Canada that actually occurred. Sources of cyber security threats in Batana, it is nation states. Nation states can actually be, it can be the entire nation itself who wants to actually compromise his neighbor or any other state with an activity to bring down the nation. இது நேஷன் ஸ்டேட் அட்டாக் அப்படின்னு பார்த்தோம்னா, இப்போ one of the biggest example was Stuxnet. I don't know if many have heard about Stuxnet. It is widely believed that Iran was developing their nuclear power plant program, and it was becoming a big threat to the entire region. So Israel was dead against it, and they even thought of carrying out a war with Iran. But then they came up with other ways to actually disrupt the Iranian nuclear development program. So they came up with a malware. The malware was one of the most sophisticated malware. Stuxnet பத்தி பேசணும்னா that alone will consume all our 1 hour or 2 hour session. Stuxnet and the malware that was embedded, it was so original in nature that because these systems are controlled in a nuclear power plants, உள்ளுக்குள்ள systems like centrifuges are controlled using small controller, Siemens controller. And Siemens or a controller, they wanted to compromise, but how do they get into that? Because it is highly secure area. So they started what US and Israel actually did was they carried out a test simulation by using their own old technologies, because this technology that they were using in Iran had more on the security, on the centrifuge details எல்லாம் கலெக்ட் பண்ணி அந்த ஒரு ஓல்டு இதுலேருந்து சிமென்ஸ் கண்ட்ரோல் எடுத்து அதை சென்ட்ரிஃபியூஜோட மேட்ச் பண்ணி, then they compromised the controller, and for compromising the controller they had to use the system. The system was the system that was still controlling that centrifuge was an XP system. So an XP system like an entire program that they modified some of this to make sure that the centrifuges run. If it is set to run at 5,000 RPM, they actually changed it to run at about 15,000 RPM or 20,000 RPM, so that it rotates too much and it blows out. So that way, when they did that, the entire nuclear program for Iran actually went back by many years. So criminal groups, like I said, they are groups that the hackers generally form groups to with an intent to commit fraud with a financial motive or a financial gain. So mostly criminal groups are well organized. Hacker groups are also well organized. Among hackers generally, small time hackers are generally motivated with a financial or a personal gain, or a revenge, or or some form of personal vendetta கூட சொல்லலாம். ஸோ ஹேக்கர்ஸ் வந்து ஒரு மேஜர் இது பார்த்தோன்னா, ஒரு சிஸ்டமில் ஹேக் பண்ணோம். இப்போ இஃப் ஐ சே ஐ வாண்ட் டு அட்டாக் ஆண்டவன் ஆசிரமில் இருக்கிற ஒரு ப்ரொஃபஸரோடைய இதை பூரா நான் டீட்டெயிலை பூரா கலெக்ட் பண்ணணும் அப்படின்னு நினச்சேன்னா, இட் வில் பி ஜஸ்ட் ஃபார் த சேக் ஆஃப், not for the sake of thrill or something, but I need to understand that what this professor has got and things like that before I even do this. Some of them even have intents just for the sake of fun to say, okay, I'm just going to attack and gather some information on this so and so person. Terrorist groups, it is well known. They nowadays are the most biggest threats, like what ISIS was doing a couple of years back. If people think that ISIS has gone, I will be very disappointed to say that they are very much aware they are still there in the field. Terrorist attack is generally to disrupt the whole country, threaten the national security of the country and things like that, which can actually also cause mass casualties. I think it was this year or last year, there were a couple of drone attacks with the intent to damage, but I think some of the nations actually had a more defense mechanism to protect themselves. Malicious insiders, it's an insider threat. They are people who are generally motivated with revenge or intent to make sure that the entire company because எனக்கு இப்போ நான் வந்து I'm earning about 10,000 rupees per month as my salary. I am a very good skilled programmer. பட் நான் போய் என்னுடைய இமீடியட் பேர் கிட்ட சொல்ல, இந்த பாரு, நான் இத்தனை ஒரு 2 வருஷமா வேலை பார்த்துட்டு இருக்கேன், எனக்கு நீ ரைஸும் கொடுக்க மாட்டேங்கிற, எனக்கு ஒன்றும் இதுவும் பண்ண மாட்டேங்கிற, ஸோ எனக்கு இதுக்கு வந்து ஏதாவது ஒரு சொல்யூஷன் சொல்லி எனக்கு பே ரைஸ் கொடு, இல்லை எனக்கு இதை கொடு அது கொடு அப்படின்னு சொல்லி கேட்போம். So if the manager or the boss or if his peer actually refuses and tries and does not recognize the person's capabilities, he can actually become a insider threat. And most insider threats lam pathona, if I am an insider, I wouldn't want to leave a trace where it can be traced back to me to say I was the person who was responsible for it. So malicious insider threats also is very, very serious. Corporate spies is generally people who conduct industrial gathering information and things like that on infrastructure systems and things for development of their own company or for someone else. Are we cybersecurity ready? It is expected that about 50 billion devices are going to be connected globally by 2035, but it is now not 2035. You can actually move it by 10 years ahead. 2025 kulliye vande you can have more than 50 billion devices connected because of extensive use of internet and things like that. The reason for it is this pandemic, which has actually speeded up the process in almost all IT areas. including cybersecurity, including artificial intelligence, and data in almost all ways in all spheres of IT. Smartphones, smart cities, smart homes. இதெல்லாம் வந்து you can expect a raise by about at least about 20 to 30% in the near future now. And that also will be by 2030 you will actually see a lot of them. When we if we look at asking the question, are we cybersecurity compliant and are we ready to face these type of challenges up in Patana, it is a big no. No country has got is not foolproof. Every country has got its own gaps, and that is a worrying concern. If we look at the next generation of war, it is definitely not going to be on physical basis. Probably or a fourth world war and the if it is going to be fought with guns and weapons, I'll be really surprised. Most of it will be either cyber weapons to bring down entire nations grid infrastructure, critical infrastructure services and things like that. So this area is a worrying trend. We are seeing a lot of activity in this area. So it is அதை கொஞ்சம் பார்க்க வேண்டிய ஒரு செக்யூர் பண்ண வேண்டிய ஒரு இதுதான் ஏரியா தான். சைபர் செக்யூரிட்டி ஸ்டாட்டிஸ்டிக்ஸை பற்றி ஏதாவது பேசணும் அப்படின்னா ஒரு 40 seconds to வரும் 1 minute-க்குள்ள there is a new cyber security attack that is generally initiated. 2020 மட்டுமே during the pandemic it saw about 400% increase in ransomware attacks on many systems. There was one incident that actually crippled the entire UK's health infrastructure system, where because of that a couple of patients actually died because of the ransomware attack. But once the hacker realized that he has hit a hospital service, he actually provided them with a decryption key because there were people who were dying. Generally, such things they don't want to be carrying out such things where people die or things like that, because their motive is mostly financial gains. But it did see a lot of increase in recent times. 2021, early 2021 statistics also indicate that there was too many ransomware attacks across the globe. About 25,000 malicious applications are detected and blocked by antivirus on a regular basis, especially if you look at different sources of information. It is a the information that is gathered is generally published by a global organization which collects information from different antivirus companies and things like that. Malicious applications, like I said, it can be very damaging. It can be very motivated by many different areas. In 2020 மட்டும் பார்த்தோம்னா almost about 65% of the organizations had a worldwide cybersecurity attack. We used to get, as an organization, we ourselves used to get phishing mails and things like that. Though you will have 2 or 3 layers of protection for mail servers alone, some of them will actually spill through and pass through with some other intents. But then we also need to understand that it is very critical that employee education is provided appropriately to see through these things. 95% of malwares are generally socially engineered. It is about targeting a person with a specific intent to get into the organization network. Either major attacks was mostly on small and medium middle business segment. That is because they were not cybersecurity ready. And in big organizations, you actually have a lot of layers on security that actually helps you out. Every day there is about 300,000 malware development by different people to steal data or compromise data. Most malwares have a lot of similarities within them, because when we look at the dark web, when we go and buy some malware from dark web and we modify it, it will have the signatures very similar. So that is the reason some of these malwares can actually be detected by the antivirus, but some of them may not even be detected because of non-availability of the right tool. Ransomware attacks actually cause a lot of damage financially. Total ransomware costs in 2020 was about $20 billion. Nearly, it's quite worrying when we look at the trends like that. Between March 9th and 2020 and 6th April 2020, coronavirus websites alone, there were about 300 websites that were registered just to lure victims into spamming. Some of them even entered their credit card numbers and started experiencing problems. And I actually had witnessed one person coming to us and say that I have done this. Now, what is the way forward? When you register your credit card or your personal information in this malicious website, you will have to now go back to changing all your credentials, going back to your respective bank people to get your credit card or debit card transferred, changed, and things like that. It is very dangerous. It was very dangerous then. I think many of these websites have been brought down in recent times. It has actually reduced by a lot of it. So 2020 organizations will also see a layer of attack on IoT devices. So IoT devices alone now, as we see, have roughly about 8 billion devices which are interconnected. So that also will increase the sphere of increase the surface area of attack and to be exploited. For example, இப்போ ஒரு டிவி ஸ்மார்ட் டிவி இருக்கு, அந்த ஸ்மார்ட் டிவியை கொண்டு போய் நான் என்னுடைய இன்டர்நெட் வைஃபைல கனெக்ட் பண்ணிட்டு, பிகாஸ் ஐ வாண்ட் டு சி நெட்ஃப்ளிக்ஸோ இல்லை எனக்கு ஏதோ ஒரு ப்ரோக்ராம் பார்க்கணும் அப்படிங்கிறதுனால நான் கனெக்ட் பண்ணுறேன் அப்படின்னு வச்சுப்போம். If the firmware is vulnerable, it is likely to be exploited. So it is very important to secure each of these devices appropriately. Smart devices ஆகட்டும், smartphones ஆகட்டும், இல்லை any device like your home cameras. Home cameras you have put in security cameras just to keep yourself monitoring the home as you are out and things like that. But if it is exploited, you can actually shut it down and commit a crime. So average cost of data, a single data breach is about $3.2 million, which is also extremely expensive in terms of firm-wide. Some of them may not even have that kind of money to manage. Cybersecurity researchers expect that the crime is projected to rise and hit about 6 trillion globally by 2021, which is a projection that was actually put in by Gartner. Gartner also said that it is going to have about 133 billion cybersecurity in terms of securing the infrastructure can reach up to this 100 billion mark by 2022. But by now itself, I think early 2021, we are seeing so much of expenses and resources put into by different companies just to secure their infrastructure. Global business, 68% of global business actually felt that cybersecurity is a big threat, and it can harm the organization a lot. Most of this, like I mentioned, இது எல்லாமே financially motivated area. Financially எதுவாக இருந்தாலும் இப்போ if I'm going to spend 6 months understanding a company, எனக்கு அதுலேருந்து ஏதாவது ஒரு ரிட்டர்ன் வரணும். So return varanonna, then I'm motivated financially, and very little is motivated by in terms of espionage and things like that. Each of this is mostly by some of them hacktivists and hacker groups, and 28% of your phishing mails is likely to have a malware embedded in them. So it's very important to have your user education in terms of it. This is also a data that was published widely by a cybersecurity observer. These are the different types of attacks and number of attacks that have been carried out on a daily basis or things like that. Motivators அப்படின்னு பார்த்தோன்னா, it is mostly money, patriotism, fun is very, very little, espionage is also very little, disgruntlement is also very little, because nowadays actually many firms recognize the potential of an employee and try to engage with the employee rather than actually discouraging him from any of these sources. 70% of all data, like I mentioned, is mostly financially motivated, but the cyber crime is expected to hit 1.5 trillion each year going forward. 25% of data breach is mostly related to stealing commercial information from different companies. I think there was a recent incident where actually one company, because they had just got into with a new business model and become a competitor to other company, அங்க இருக்கிற ஒரு ஐடி பர்சனை வந்து காம்ப்ரமைஸ் பண்ணினா மோட்டிவேட் பண்ணி பைசா கொடுத்து இந்த வேலையெல்லாம் பண்ணி they actually got that guy to come to the other firm with the information. So இந்த மாதிரி இன்ஃபர்மேஷன்ஸ்லாம் கூட நடக்கும். those informations actually are pretty dangerous. அதில் ஸ்டாப் பண்ணுறதுக்கு வழியும் ரொம்ப கம்மி தான் அதில், because it is mostly because of financial motivation things, because it's mostly financially motivated. அதனால common causes of security na patana weak or stolen credentials. Stolen credentials can even appear on your dark web. For example, if you are Google la poi, if you have been saving your passwords, you can actually auto-generated passwords, you can actually run a Google analyzer to say, okay, this is my how many of this is published over dark web and things like that. Google will actually tell you if your password is weak and it has been published in different areas. So it's very important to understand these things as a overall from an overall perspective of securing your own personal accounts and your personal records. There are many other tools which actually helps you find out if your passwords are vulnerable to any attack. Mostly it is because using those credentials is when you actually cause a disruption. There are too many. If a person, like I was mentioning yesterday about permissions, permissions should be provided only on a need to know basis. Extra permissions லாம் கொடுத்தோம் அப்படின்னா ஒரு folder இருக்கு, then you are likely to be hit with malware or things like that. Most payload used widely was malware. Tools that were used were social engineering, phishing, which is the most common of all the necessary attacks. So insight into cybersecurity அப்படின்னா now there is about 5 to 7 stages. One is reconnaissance. Reconnaissance is to analyze and get information on the company that is going to be attacked, and then you are going to scan that company for vulnerability, and if there are vulnerability, then you start looking to weaponize it with a payload injection. So on a payload injection weaponize பண்ண அப்புறம் then you will try to hit them company, and once the payload is delivered, then you will start escalating the privileges of the privileges to compromise more areas of the entire network. Internal reconnaissance is nothing but you will now start targeting the entire network. You will gather information on the entire network and try to see what all information can be taken out with some motive. So this is generally how your area, stage by stage, how your cyber threat attack works. Laws of cybersecurity அப்படின்னு பார்த்தோம்னா, if there is a vulnerability, I was mentioning just 2 days back, if there is a vulnerability, it will be exploited no matter what it is. So that is the reason why many firms actually hire pen testers to find if this solution has got if the new development has got vulnerabilities, and if it is there, how it can be secured. There is nothing like very secure environment, everything is vulnerable, or a program development இருந்ததுன்னா அந்த program will be vulnerable at some point of time. அதை exploit பண்ணத்தான் போறாங்க. So it is something that we need to be very careful. அதே மாதிரி we trust humans too much, and we trust devices too much. So அது வந்து பண்ணவே கூடாது. So now newest latest technology is that from a cybersecurity point of view, that we are looking at is only zero trust networks, and if it is for home, securing a smart home and things like that, we will look towards edge computing techniques. There are a couple of papers that I have written on them. You can read it in Google, it is openly available. And there is also a small chapter on in this area where why is that we have so many flaws that needs to be addressed. So with innovations, you also have opportunities, and the opportunities will also have vulnerabilities, and vulnerabilities, if it is there, will be exploited. So it's very important to understand all of this. So idhula edavadhu oru sandegam irundaduna, you will just go back to your root cause, which is your law number 1. Questions. இதில் சில ஏரியாஸ்லாம் கவர் பண்ணல, அந்த ஏரியாலாம் வந்து ஐ வில் கவர் இட் அப் டுமாரோ when we do the final forensics and cyber security ரெண்டும் அதில் கம்பைன் பண்ணி ஒரு செஷன் நாளைக்கு இருக்கு, because forensics is also a part of cyber security. Any questions? Thank you for providing me an opportunity to give you a brief overview. It is not an in-depth session. In-depth session is going to consume a lot of time, so it's a very very brief session. Just the mail நோட்டமா தான் நம்ம பார்த்துருக்கோம், இதை வந்து இன்னும் ரொம்ப இன்டெப்தா எதுவுமே பார்க்கல. அதே மாதிரி இப்போ பென் டெஸ்ட் பண்ணி காட்டணும்னா that will be something that itself will take a lot of time. Questions please. Hello? எதுவும் காதுல விழல, நான் செஷனே ஏதாவது was I missing something ன்னு எனக்கு புரியல. That is reason why I was.
அப்படி இல்ல சார், நோட் பண்ணி வச்சிருக்கா, தனியா உங்களுக்கு வந்து மெசேஜ் பண்ணி கேட்டுக்கலாம் அப்படின்னு